What is up, everybody? Welcome back to youtube.com/RajFormer. I'm your host for today, Roger Pokorny, and today is a very special video. I am here with probably one of my favorite people on the internet as a whole, and definitely in the video game media side of things. This person, you guys definitely know, started off over at IGN, started with guides, and worked his way up to creating some of the best pieces of video game journalism out there, in my humble opinion, and did a lot of stuff in between: interviews, podcast beyond, a lot of different things, editorials, op-eds. And about 10 months ago, 12 months in January, him included with Tim Geddes, Nick Scarpino, and Greg Miller left IGN to go full-time with kindafunny.com. And at kindafunny.com, they do so many things, podcasts galore. They just opened up PS I Love You XOXO, which is their brand new PlayStation podcast, very akin to their old one, and a ton of other stuff. Colin Moriarty is here, the pride of Long Island himself. How you doing, Colin?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me. Very nice words. I don't know if I agree with everything you're saying, but I appreciate the kindness on those. It's good to be here with you.
Oh, it's great to be here with you. I really appreciate you taking time out of the hectic Kinda Funny schedule. It's infamous at this point. Very, very crazy hours you guys work to bring good content. So I appreciate it, man.
No, it's my pleasure to be here with you. No problem.
Yeah. So, okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is I introduced you as the pride of Long Island, right? Like that is your thing. Your Twitter banner is Long Island. You say that in the zombie apocalypse, you will find a way to get from San Francisco to Long Island. It is your home. For context, I'm growing up Long Island. You know, I don't feel necessarily that love of Long Island, that passion for it, but I'm very interested in, for you, like, what about Long Island, except for, you know, your family being there and everything, like the culture, like what about that really makes it your hometown? You lived in Boston, San Francisco. I mean, these places are very known for their culture. What about Long Island is very, very important to you.
I think you'll find when you're still in high school, right? I think when you leave and you go to college and stuff, I think you'll find a more kindred connection to it, like I did. It's where we're from. It's where I'm from. And so I always liked it because it's a place, I've always explained it as like, you actually have to try to go there. It's not like saying like, I think people should be proud of wherever they're from. I think that's great, or not if that's what they want. But you're from Ohio. Well, you drive through Ohio, or you go to Ohio to do something, or you have to, you know, to get from point A to point B, you have to go through Ohio or something like that. Long Island exists, and it's just this fucking place that no one goes to, and unless you're from there, there's no reason to really go there. And so, you know, I connect with the kind of my Irish Italian roots on Long Island. You know, it's a very Italian place. I love Italian food. I grew up Italian in my Italian family. So I have those kinds of associations, but it's also where I'm from. And maybe it's because I love history and I love lineage and I love dates and all that kind of stuff. But everything that brought me to this place started there. And so I'm always going to, you know, I started writing for GameFAQs when I was there. I played my first video game on Long Island. I bought my first Mega Man game on Long Island. I got all my video game consoles there. I mean, it's important to me. So I know it's weird to a lot of people to have that kind of like rah-rah attitude about where they're from. Maybe not that rare, but for a place like Long Island, somewhat rare, but I'm proud of it. And I lived in Boston and I lived in San Francisco, and I don't think either of those places have anything on New York. Yeah.
I mean, especially since a Chick-fil-A just opened up in Port Jefferson. Very exciting.
Yeah, I saw that. And it's awesome. And I was saying to Greg, I think I was born in Port Jefferson. And so I was like, I think it's funny that the first Chick-fil-A on Long Island it was erected where in the city that I was born. It's almost like a little call out to me, even though it surely isn't. It's a call out to all the rich people in Port Jefferson that have money to spend.
Yeah, and they waited like 24 hours to get into it, which I think is hilarious. But you know, you mentioned a lot of things there, a lot of things that we're gonna get to. But you mentioned like your love of lineage and politics and such like that. I want to know like where that came from, especially like politics and history. Like how young were you when you really got into like politics and stuff like that? Where did that come from?
It's funny. People ask me this, and it goes back to Newsday, Long Island's newspaper. In 1991, when we invaded Iraq in the Gulf War, I remember being fascinated by the newspaper coverage of the event. I remember like poring over the maps and, you know, Stormin Norman, Schwarzkopf, and all these kinds of things. And I didn't really understand anything. I just was trying to figure out like, what is this and what is this place? And I remember watching the footage on CNN of, you know, us bombing it. It was like basically really the first live war we ever had. I mean, where we were seeing it as it was happening and unfolding. And I remember just being like, I remember thinking in my young mind, this is fascinating. There's a reason that this is happening. I don't quite understand why it's happening. There's a reason why we're in this place. I don't quite understand the reason, but I know I love these maps. I know I love these weapons. I know I love this military and all of these kinds of things. And it was really the Gulf War that started my path down, being more into cartography, more into history, more into, politics and understanding, ultimately why we got involved there. So it really does start at a very young age for me.
Yeah. And I mean, like, eventually you major in American history, right? Like, you love American Revolution. You love to talk about it. You love everything about that. So when did that specifically happen? And when did that love kind of form?
Colonial American history started really in elementary school, probably a little bit after the Gulf War, when I was exposed to the Constitution. And I was always fascinated, and I didn't really understand them until later, the way I understand them now. And maybe I don't understand them still the way I need to. I was always fascinated that there was this group of men that came together in the 1760s, 1770s, 1780s that happened to be the smartest men in the room, and they all found each other. And I was always really fascinated that, and I'll stand by that, there's no example of that ever happening anywhere else in American history. When you have Alexander Hamilton and Benjamin Franklin and George Washington and John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and James Monroe and like just Benjamin Church, just an exorbitant amount of smart people that all put it on the line. I always had a real affinity for Benjamin Franklin's saying, like, we all must hang together or we will surely hang alone. I always liked that they, when you really think about what they were doing, they could have been killed at any time. And they had the balls to put their wealth on the line. I always talk about John Hancock. John Hancock owned about 1/400th of the entire wealth of the colonies, which was extraordinary. There was only a few million people there, but he had everything to lose. Mm-hmm. And so I was always really fascinated by that. And that's how I got into colonial history. And then that brought me obviously to the Revolution, and that brought me to the French and Indian War and the War of 1812 and the Constitutional Convention and the Continental Congress. And that's how I really developed that love. And so by the time I was I want to say I had 4th or 5th grade, I knew that was what I was going to do with my life. And it didn't end up working out that way, but I almost got to that point. Yeah. Yeah,
I just think that's very interesting, because I feel like when a lot of people get into social studies and history, they kind of focus on maybe more modern things, like maybe like World War II or something like that, because that's like a little bit more pop culturally. They talk about that a lot. But like, it's very interesting. That is a very interesting time period in America. And I just think that, yeah, it's interesting that you fell in love with that specific part of American history. But you are really, really into a lot of different things. That's one of my favorite things about you, is that you're not just a gaming person, right? Like, when you tweet, it's like 10% video games, that's like 90% politics or sports or music. Talk to me about music, like your love of music. You play the guitar. Were you in bands? Did you play a lot of that? Were you like doing gigs or anything?
Yeah. So my native instrument's actually the drums. And the reason that I don't play them much anymore is I just can't. I grew up in a house in Brookhaven, New York, and it was, like, we didn't have noise complaints or anything like that. So I didn't pick up the guitar or the bass, which are what I really play primarily now, until I was in college, because I realized when I was living in Boston, I just can't have my kit here. People are going to fucking kill me if I keep playing. And so music's always been a really huge part of my life. We actually just recorded a Game Over Greggy show topic about music and musical suggestions. And the fact is that my family is very musical, and they're really into music, and I grew up with it. It wasn't something that was cursorily around me. That music was something that was put in my face. And I was told from a very early age, it's important that you play an instrument, and it's important that you know music and you understand it and you can read it, even though I can't really read music anymore. It's been a long time. And I really appreciate that. I was saying that the story on the Game Over Greggy show about, I remember being 3 years old. It was like 1987. My parents had just gotten a new Crown Victoria Ford, and my dad was testing out the tape deck and put in Moody Blues' Days of Future Past, which is a famous prog rock album. And that's my earliest musical kind of memory is there. And it all started there. And then, being the youngest sibling of 4, I got exposed to hip hop at a very early age of alt rock and grunge. Obviously classic rock for my parents and new wave. And so music's always been a really instrumental point in my life. It's not one of those things that is just there in the background. Like, I physically listen to music every day, sit there and just listen to it. I got up this morning at 9 and I didn't get out of my room until a little after 10, because I just put my headphones on. I rolled over, put my headphones into my phone, and just started listening to music for an hour. Yeah. So yeah, I love music, and I love other things. Gaming is not my favorite thing in the world. It's just not. And I don't want to fake that to anyone. I have a passion for gaming, but I have a passion for a lot of things.
Yeah, and I really, that's the thing that I think is very apparent about you. You're not faking any of this, right? You're who you are, and I think a lot of people expect some things from people like, well, you got to talk about gaming because you're in the gaming industry, but you talk about everything, and I appreciate that. Another thing you talk about, which, I might not understand too much, is sports. where did your love for specifically the Islanders and Jets come from? Because you're a diehard Islanders and Jets fan. Was it from your family, or was it kind of organically because of your love of the island?
No, I mean it's those are our, as you know, those are our teams, and
yeah,
there are Giants fans and Ranger fans. I mean, we are Islanders fans and Jets fans on the island, and Mets fans to a degree, and Nets fans. But my family is actually somewhat passive with sports, with the exception of baseball. We're like really huge Yankee fans, and so I grew up a big Yankee fan, go to Yankee games. I was actually really passionate about baseball, and I got out of baseball a little bit after college because I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of it, but I feel like the MLB is broken and the salary cap system sucks and there's no parity in the league and the same fucking teams over and over again. Yeah. Although like what happened yesterday when Houston beat New York is an example maybe of that not being true. But I grew up playing hockey, so I was always really attached to the local team. I was actually a huge Sharks fan when I was a kid too, because I really liked their logo. And they're obviously the local team here in San Francisco, but I am an Islanders fan through and through. I think it is that kindred connection to the island as well. But I mean, I've been an Islander fan forever, and the Jets, I absolutely love the Jets. I haven't missed a Jets game in years. I was talking about this with someone. I wish I knew I loved football earlier, and I didn't really realize I loved football until it was too late for me to play. Mm-hmm. I really fell in love with the sport. I think it's a fantastic sport. You're a smart kid. I wonder if you might not find something there to love as well, because what I really loved about it is the intellectual aspect of the sport. Everyone that plays in the NFL went to college. The sport is 95% in the classroom. It's studying, it's exposing opponents' weaknesses. It's a chess game. That's why I love when the coordinators sit in the booths and look at the field from top down and look at it like a chessboard. It's an intellectual game. It marries my love of violent sports with my love of smart sports. You know what I mean? Yeah. Hockey is a super violent sport. It's a sport of finesse and speed, but it is very violent. And the violence serves a purpose. But the violence in football is the game, combined with that book learning and that classroom learning and that film study. I love the game. And so the Jets, I mean, I live and breathe the Jets and the Islanders. The Islanders open up on Friday, actually. And I turned down plans this weekend because they're playing on Friday and Saturday. I'm like, I can't, I got to watch the games.
That's great. Yeah, like I do like here and there watch games, and that's the part of it that does hook me all the time. It's not the violent part. It's, seeing how they adjust to different teams and how they adjust to different things that the other teams are doing. Clearly I'm not that technical about it. But talking about you part of your passion is gaming, right? So I want to know, definitely. Yeah. So I want to know, like, where did that come from specifically, and what did you start off with? What consoles, and how were you introduced to it? Did your parents buy you something? Was it like a friend or a neighbor?
It was my brother, and my brother's 12 years older than me, so he was always of age to play games since I was born. He started with an Atari 2600 and an NES. My first console was an NES, which is still my favorite console of all time. And I just was exposed to it by watching and playing, and then eventually playing myself. And what's so funny is that when I really look back on it, I can't believe the games I was playing at the age I was playing them, and I was playing them competently. I go back and play some games like Kid Icarus, which is a game I love, one of my favorite NES games, and I'm like, I was way better at this when I was literally 6 years old than I am now. And so I was just, I tell stories about how my brother I would be put to bed, my brother would still be up. He would be like 18. I'd be, 5 or 6 and 6 or 7, whatever. And he would basically just come knock on my door when everyone was asleep, and he'd let me into his room, and I'd just sit in his room and I'd watch him play, and we would play Final Fantasy 2 or Dragon Quest or whatever it was. So that's how I was exposed to games, and it kind of ran away from there. The funny thing is that that's still our connection now that he's 42 years old, and is an avid game. He has a family. He's a professional animator at Sesame Workshop, but he still has this insatiable appetite for games and collecting games, and has this huge Famicom collection and this huge Super Famicom collection. I mean, he's really into it, and that's our bond. That's always been our bond. Was he doesn't give a fuck about sports. He doesn't care about politics. He doesn't care about history. He cares about games, and that's always been like the thing that bound us together.
Wow. That's very similar to me and my little brother in terms of, that's kind of our bond too. But you mentioned before when you're talking about the island, Mega Man, that's when you bought your first Mega Man cartridge or whatever. I want to know why Mega Man, where did the love for Mega Man? Because you talk about Mega Man, you love Mega Man. Mega Man 3, if I'm not mistaken, is your favorite video game of all time. Yep. So I want to know where this comes from and why Mega Man compared to all the other ones. I'm not saying that Mega Man's a bad game. I love Mega Man.
No, it's a valid question because it really is like an obsession of mine. And in the realm of gaming. And I think it could have been any game, but I think it was the right place and the right time for Mega Man 2 specifically. It's a masterclass. It doesn't get any better than that. And there's other side scrollers that I really, really love that I think are fantastic on the NES. I think the Ninja Gaiden series is great. I think the Castlevania series is great. And they control great, and they control differently. Castlevania's got a very heavy feel. Ninja Gaiden is very fast. Mega Man is punishing but fair. It's grueling, but it's fun. It's colorful. The characters are interesting. The story's nonsense, but it's there. Which is why I want to write the reboot so bad, because I think I could do something with it. And I just think that the 6 games on the NES, I don't know if you played the Legacy Collection on PlayStation or Xbox, but these are really fantastic games. And unlike a lot of games from, say, the PS1 or N64 era that really don't hold up in my mind, I really don't think some of these games hold up. When you have a flat surface and the most you have to worry about technology-wise is parallax scrolling or some complicated music that requires a special chip, these games hold up because of the gameplay. And that's not something that you can say about a lot of games today. I think that some games just don't play that well. I don't think it's even that important to a lot of games. And I think that's really disappointing. It was all about gameplay. That's all you had was the fucking box art and the hope that someone would pick it up and find something fun within it. And they did find something fun with those series. That's why there were 6 of them in 6 years, is because people loved it. And yeah, so I mean, that's why. I mean, it's my passion for that. Those 6 games in particular, my passion is like unrivaled in terms of games. You know? Yeah,
definitely. And you mentioned the box art of Mega Man, which I think it's just you look at that box and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna get a grown man shooting a little gun. Very excited about that.
It's very weird. The box art, the disconnect. I'll never understand the disconnect between Capcom and Capcom Japan, Capcom America and Capcom Japan in terms of the box art. If you ever look at the box art for the 6 Famicom versions, they're awesome. The box art's great. It looks normal. It wasn't until 4 that they really like nailed the box art in terms of like, this is actually what the characters look like. Like, we have a guy who draws this and this is what it actually looks like. They just like made it up as they went. I don't understand how they got that character out of that sprite, but you know, whatever. It is iconic. So maybe not for a good reason.
Yeah. But yeah, so you love Mega Man, and this leads perfectly into GameFAQs. This is where you started to write, and this got you into the industry. You started, correct me if I'm wrong, there's like different things I see on the internet. 14, 15 when you started writing?
I was 14, yeah.
Okay, which is very interesting because like I started 14, and it's interesting to see people starting really young. So I want to know why you started specifically writing guides out of everything. Was it just out of pure passion? Was it out of like, oh, I'm going to pretty much do this anyway because I'm going to get everything, so why don't I just kind of format it and put it up on the internet? What was that?
I really don't remember, to be honest. I mean, I don't know like why it started. I think that, you know, before I started, I wrote for GameFAQs. It was January of 2000 when I posted my first FAQ. That was 10th grade. So it was really in 9th grade when I started, and even 8th grade when I really started like trying to write for fan sites. I had like my own Star Wars, like stupid Angel Fire site. And I was writing like little things for other gaming sites, and I was on Merc, which is a thing that still exists, MIRC, which is like a chat protocol program that's really old, where you could find like-minded people that are into games. And I was just passionate about this. I had no like end goal. Like, that was what was funny about it. Is like, I was just doing it because I thought it was fun. And then I just kind of got sucked down the rabbit hole where I was like, for the next 2 years of my life, that's like what I really did. And ended up writing a lot of FAQs, but there was no end goal. Like I always say, when IGN approached me to start writing for them when I was 18, I was actually 17 when they first emailed me. There was no, that wasn't what I anticipated or wanted. It just happened. It could have been anyone. I just did it because I thought it was fun. So but that's where I started. GameFAQs is where it all began. And I owe a lot to Jeff Vesey. I know he doesn't own the site anymore, but I owe a great deal to him.
Yeah. And you mentioned getting messaged by IGN. And when you got messaged, were you like thinking like, oh, I didn't think about this before, but this could be a thing? Or was it just like, oh yeah, I'll just do this as like a part-time thing on the side?
No, it popped up as when I got that email. They first emailed me. IGN and GameFAQs had like a cooperative relationship for a while in the late 90s. So they were like mirroring their content, and then something happened where I don't know the business realities of it, but GameFAQs was just like, they're not going to be able to work with IGN anymore. So IGN's like, we'll just make a competitor. And so they did, IGN FAQs. And they originally emailed me in like September of 2002 and were like, can we just use your FAQs on IGN? I'm like, that's fine. And then they emailed me back and they're like, by the way, we actually really need like new strategy guide writers, and would you be interested in doing this? And I said, absolutely. So my first strategy guides were for like Need for Speed, Hot Pursuit 2, and Spyro Enter the Dragonfly, and like 007 Nightfire, like really old, like kind of shitty games. But that's how I got my start. And then I even at that point, I wasn't necessarily into making it a full-time gig, although that's when I really started to pursue the possibility of that happening. But I was still dedicated to going to college, and I did. So
yeah, and talking about college, it leads perfectly into this. You go to Northeastern, very prestigious school, awesome school, and you go there. And what is the goal there? Like, what did you want to accomplish out of Northeastern in order to get an American history degree? What was your goal for that?
Well, when I went to Northeastern, I mean, the entire idea was to leverage that great school to get a good education and to see it through. And I worked at Massachusetts Historical Society when I was there for a little while, which was awesome. And that's kind of the direction I wanted to go in. I still wrote for IGN. I even one summer went to IGN and was an intern for the entire summer. They actually offered me a job at that point, or I was interviewed and I was 19 and I was offered an associate editor position, or that was what I was interviewing for, and probably would have gotten it if I really wanted it, for IGN GameCube. And I turned it down because I was like, I really should finish school. My mom would be disappointed. My family's very education oriented. My mom taught at Northeastern and went there. So I didn't want to let anyone down. And I'm glad that I didn't take the job offer. I'm glad I finished school. But the goal was to get my history degree. And then I actually had started I was going to eventually work my way in to get my graduate degree. And that was the plan. The fall of 2007 was when I was really supposed to start taking classes for my graduate degree. And it was in May when I graduated of 2007. And in June, IGN offered me a job. I didn't even apply. They just offered it to me. And I was like, well, this is a fork in the road. I'm never going to get this offer again. This isn't what I intended on doing. I'm not even sure this is what I really want to do, but I took the job offer and it ended up being a great choice. It led me down a path of, I was very fulfilled at the job. I was very happy that they offered it to me. They were very good to me. And, I can always go back to school. It's not going to happen now probably, but it was a left turn that I didn't intend on taking. Working for IGN and freelancing was a means to an end. It paid my bills. I mean, they were very good to me in college. They paid me quite a bit of money. And that was like my source of income. And that was all I had ever intended it to be. There was a point where I kind of let go of the dream. After pursuing it in my mind, I'm like, it's not going to happen. I don't really even care. I got a girlfriend here who I haven't even talked to now in 8 years. I got, my friends are here and blah, 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 blah. And it turned out quite differently from that. So
was that the year that you stopped playing video games for a little bit and you just kind of laid back?
Yeah. That was earlier. That was so like 2004 into 2005 was when I really stopped playing games for a while. With the exception, I still bought a few games, but that's when I really kind of put it on the back burner. That's when I was like probably the most socially active I ever was, and enjoying my, as you're going to go to college soon. What are you in 12th grade?
11th
grade. So a couple of years you'll go to college and you'll realize that, you got to take advantage of that time and meet people and experience that kind of stuff. And I kind of had that realization and I got my fill of it. And then I went back and continued to play games.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And you talk about, freelancing and doing all this stuff. That Northeastern, very prestigious school, hard school, difficult, and you're also freelancing. How was your work ethic then, especially as a college student? A lot of people think that college students just, go out and party. How was your work ethic? How did you mix social life with schoolwork and freelancing? How did you mix all that?
It was hard. But I wasn't much of a partier. I mean, I would go to parties every once in a while, but I had my core group of friends, and that's all I hung out with them, and we hung out together and we stuck together, and that was fun. That's Ramon and all the other guys that we introduced on the show. But I basically had a protocol of like, I actually, when you go to college, you'll understand you're going to get choices about classes you're going to take and when you're going to take them. And you're going to start to figure out that like, oh, I like a class at this time. I don't like a class at this time. And most people avoid early classes. I remember the early classes were like 8 o'clock, 9:15, 10:30. Those were like the early classes. And you could take classes like 1:35, whatever. And so I would take all my classes in the morning, and people thought that was crazy. And I would try to get them into 3 days if I could. So I used to do like Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, I think, and then be done with class by like 12:30, eat lunch or whatever, and then just work until 6 or 7 on guides, and then go hang out with my girlfriend. And we lived together, so it was for a while. So that's basically how it went. And I actually did really well in school. I was actually pretty dedicated to doing everything I was going to do as to the best of my ability, and then leave the partying and the celebrating and all of that for when the work was truly done. So I actually don't know how I managed to do it all, but I did. And I managed to do everything pretty well. So I was proud of myself actually being able to do that, because Northeastern wasn't an easy place to go to school, but yeah, I managed.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Because that's just very hard things, 3 very difficult things. But I want to talk about something a little bit that I just kind of learned about you in the last month. I didn't know that you freelanced for IGN TV reality shows.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about that, because I think that's really funny.
Yeah, I have a passion for reality. Oh, I did have a real huge passion for reality television. And so Chris Carl was my boss on IGN Guides, who's now like the head of the entertainment stuff on IGN, a good friend of mine still. And he had a guy working for him named Brian Zaromsky. Zaromsky was the founder of this place called Film Force, and IGN, I think, bought them or merged with them at some point in the early 2000s, and they made IGN Movies, which used to be called IGN Film Force, and IGN TV and all this kind of stuff. Zaromsky left IGN Movies, went to IGN TV, and that was the foundation of that site. And they needed freelancers to just kind of populate the site because there was just not enough. They had like one full-time, I think Eric Goldman who's still there, was like their one guy. And so I just told them I'm into this, and this, and they let me write. And so once a week I would sit down and watch this show and then just write about it. And I was an IGN TV freelancer, and it was that writing strategy guides for the amount of money I was being paid was super grueling. Doing that stuff was actually really easy. So it was a nice balance for the money I was making. Yeah,
that's really cool, because I grew up on reality shows. I shouldn't have been watching them at the time, but I kind of grew up on those. I think that's really funny. So you get the job at IGN, you move to San Francisco full time, and then you do guides. You're doing guides. You're hired for that, right?
Yes.
And then at a certain point, correct me if I'm wrong, New Vegas was your last guide officially?
Yep, that was it.
So why did you stop doing guides? How long did it take you to kind of just like fall and just say, hey, listen, I want to do this instead?
Well, I have a very analytic mind, I think, and I think that's why I was like really into doing them for a while. I wrote 94 guides for IGN, and that's a lot of guides. I don't think anyone's ever written more guides than me in that site or anywhere. Maybe GameFAQs or some crazy people that probably wrote more. But the New Vegas broke me, and it really was this sudden thing. It wasn't this gradual thing where I'm like, I don't really want to do this anymore. I really got to that point. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And I remember, and I was already doing other stuff. I was already on Podcast Beyond for a couple of years at that point. I was already writing for other parts of the site. And my friend Nate Ahern, who's a really good friend of mine still, was leaving at the time. I think go to Apple. He works for Xbox now. But he was leaving, and I knew there was going to be an opening. And so I went and talked to Hillary Goldstein, who was the editor-in-chief at the time, who has since worked at like Microsoft and Chair, I think, and stuff like that. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't write guides anymore. I want to move over. And that's the term we use, move over, like to move to the pool. And they let me. There was like no resistance at all, and they let me do it. And that was that was a long time ago now. Since then, I just kind of made my bones in the editorial pool, and then I became the senior editor of the site or whatever. So it was just a thing. I liked writing guides. It was a great segue in. There are some people that can do it forever. I just couldn't do it anymore because I didn't know how to not do it as thoroughly and intensely as I did it. And I think that was my own problem. I don't think I needed to write as much as I did. I like my Fallout 3 guide is like 3 War and Pieces, literally.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how else to do it. And it was very thorough and people liked them, but I'm like, I can't do this anymore, especially for the amount of money that we're being paid and the amount of stress this causes me. I'm like, I don't want to do this. So they were great. They let me do it.
Yeah.
No problem.
And so you move over to the editorial pool, and you probably were doing some editorials here and there, maybe on your own. But like, how did you find your voice in terms of writing throughout, since you're 14 to now? How did you find your voice through writing? And how long do you think it really took until you're like, okay, I found my voice. I'm good at this. I can do this forever.
I don't know. I mean, I think that it's funny when I go back and read some of my FAQs that I wrote when I was like 15 or 16, I go back and honestly, I'm like, this is pretty good. Like, I don't know. And it sounds like me still. And I don't know where that came from. I often say that I think you have to read a lot to write well. And I am a voracious reader, and I was, and I am. And I think some of that comes from that. I also think it comes from the people that inspire you or the kind of style you want. Do you want an academic style? Do you want a verbose style? Do you want a conversational style? I kind of tried to marry the thing. I think I'm a little more verbose. I think I'm probably a little more academic than conversational, but like I think like you're probably experiencing in your own writings. I think that I just found the way I think I sound. Jeremy Dunham, the founder of Podcast Beyond, gave me great advice once, which is to read everything you write aloud. And if it doesn't sound right, it's not going to read right either. I think that's really good advice. And you just kind of take those things and you keep the pedal down, and you just keep writing and you keep reading and you keep working it out. And I always find the most satisfying thing is going back and reading an editorial I wrote last year. And I'm like, this was a great editorial, wasn't it? And then I I read it and I'm like, oh, it's just like, I would have written this differently. I don't really like this anymore. So you never get to a point of being comfortable, but I think I realized I was good at it. By the time I got to IGN, I think I was like, I think I'm clearly good at it. I just don't know what I'm able to do with it. And I think, I've always been really honored that people have given me such a claim as a writer, because that's what's most important to me. Like, I want to be known as a writer ultimately. And I want to write something that means something to people. And that's still my goal to this day. I'll never find the time to do it probably. But if there's one thing that I go down in history as, like, when all's said and done and I'm 80 years old and I'm retired or whatever, I want to be known as a writer. And I mean, that's important to me.
Yeah, and that's something that comes across when you talk and you identify as a writer, even when you're only doing video stuff now primarily. And I want to talk about something in terms of IGN. You kind of came there at a point where video was increasing and they're putting more editors on camera. Did you ever find sort of that evolution a little bit jarring? Did it take you a little bit to find, we talk about your voice in writing, did it take you a little bit to find your camera voice, your hosting voice?
Sure. Yeah. I was something I was resistant to. In a way, I'm still resistant to it, which is funny because, like, what we do, what kind of funny is we do videos and we do podcasts, and that's fine. And I think what we do is fun and useful to people. But I always find the written word to be the most important and the most sacred. And I've actually been quite sad watching it fall apart for a lot of places. For every Grantland or National Review or whatever you want to read that's really good, there's like all this fucking BuzzFeed shit and stuff like that. I think BuzzFeed's fine, but it's just like, I don't like the lowest common denominator stuff. So that's what I try to infuse in our videos is like a little bit of context and a little bit of nuance, and it's not just all fun and games and laughs. Like, there's something to be said. I don't want to waste people's time either. So when this was happening at IGN, I think Podcast Beyond was the nice launching pad for me. I mean, I got to do 280 episodes of that show with Greg and something like that. I think maybe even more. And I think it just taught me how to be. And Greg always says, like, I actually kind of play a character, and I don't even really realize that I'm playing myself. Yeah. But I'm playing myself as if I want to say something, as opposed to like be curled up in a corner in my room somewhere with a video game or a book, which is like my natural condition. I think Greg and I are both of the same mind, and I think that's why we worked like so prolifically together. I don't know that there's any more prolific, maybe not prolific's the right word, but well-known or whatever duo of people that have just done something together for so long. And I think it's because we both came up and learned at the same time. And he just embraced it more than I did in terms of like, this is what he really wants to do. When for me, I was like, this is the necessity at the time for the job. Is like, we have to do video. That's when I came up with the idea for, IGN conversations and PlayStation conversations. That's when I came up with the idea for doing more video content for Podcast Beyond. And we eventually made it into a video entirely. And we massaged that or whatever. And the funny thing is that I think that even though my instincts tell me that I don't want to necessarily do that stuff forever, like, I keep coming up with ideas that make it more interesting. And there's stuff out there that's really inspiring me right now to do other stuff. I mean, I love Jimquisition. I love, The Point with our friend Danny O'Dwyer on GameSpot. And I'm like, there's a way. I don't have to be curmudgeonly about this. There's a way to do it that's meaningful. And so that's what we're trying to do. So yeah, it was just, I had to do it. It was a necessity. And we tell the people that now, like, people are like, I want to be a writer. How do I get in? And I'm like, you don't. Like, like, writing's only a part of it now. Like, the days that I got in don't exist anymore. I'm sorry to say, And if I didn't evolve, if I refused, if I was like, no podcast, no videos, I would have been fired in like 2008. So it's not like it's a new development.
Yeah, it's definitely, that's kind of what I've been seeing from my point of view. I've seen more video than anything, and I've kind of, this might make you sad, I've kind of pushed my writing a little bit to the side. I've kind of focused on video because I see that as kind of the future. And it's sad though. I do love a good written word, and talking about written word, the History of series that you wrote, which I think is, I was talking about that before, some of the best pieces of video game journalism ever created. Like,
thank you.
It really is though. And like, I just want to like ask you, like, how was that, first of all, to create? Because I saw that image a while back of all the papers sprawled out on the meeting desk. How hard was that to create? But then how satisfying was it? And how long did it take you to create these things? These were long pieces. Yeah,
it was tough. And some of them I never even wrote. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I never even wrote that I never told anyone about, but people I talked to that I just didn't do anything with it. History of Naughty Dog specifically was hard. It was, I talked to 20 people over a week. I had to get that all transcribed, and I had to travel, and it was, I think I was in a position with IGN where I'm not sure that they thought it would be necessarily a profitable piece for me to do, but that it's what we call prestige pieces. It's something you do to legitimize your outlet. And say like, yeah, we have the news and we write this silly shit and we have fun, but this is something that's kind of more serious. And The history of Naughty Dog was hard. It took me a long time to write it, and weeks of just writing it and massaging it. Which massaging pieces, especially that long, is hard. Where you have to go back and you just go back to the very beginning. You start reading it again over and over again, and you just get hung up on pointless shit. And it's hard. And I don't think it's for everyone, because it's not like writing an op-ed. It's not like writing a news article. That was really long. I mean, that was like 50, 60, 70,000 words or something like that. So it was tough, but I was happy to do it. And I was happy it resonated with people. People still talk about those pieces, and I'm so happy to see that I feel like video game journalism is really not very good right now. And like just generally, it's just kind of garbage. And there's people out there that are just doing great work, that are keeping the dream alive, that I so appreciate. I think I talk about Jason Schreier and Patrick Klepek a lot, that are the guys, Alexa Ray, Korea at GameSpot is who I don't want to say mentor, because I don't think that's the right word, but she and I talk a lot. And I've inspired, I think, her to continue to do it. I'm like, because this stuff means something, and it's not the same churn and garbage that you write. Like one site gets a story and then everyone writes about it. It's like, all right, like what else can we say? I think people don't say anything anymore, and so I try to inform them with my op-eds. I tried to say something. I have I have controversial opinions about something, but at least I said it. And that's like. Yeah. More than I can say for a lot of stuff that's going on today, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And you are known for your outspokenness. I think for better. Some people might say for worse.
A lot of people think it's for worse, but I don't really care.
Yeah, and that's another thing. You don't care. You really are yourself, and I appreciate that. And that comes off in conversation with Colin. And this is the beginning of the Game Over Grade channel, Kind of Funny. When did you, because you were skeptical a bit, you didn't really know where conversation with Colin would lead, if it was a good idea. When were you down with Kind of Funny so much to the point where you're like, okay, I'm ready to leave IGN, I can do this full time?
Well, I think it was a combination of probably last year. I mean, it was a combination of I was ready and we had this thing established, and I was also just not happy anymore. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it has to do with what I was talking about. Was like, I just don't like the way things are going. I feel like I'm fighting a trend that is just not going to change. And it's not necessarily about what we were doing, because I think there's great writers at the site and we were doing great work. It's just the general trend of like less is more, and like clickable headlines and like top 10 lists. And I'm like, oh man, I don't want to do this. Like I just don't want to do this. I don't find this satisfying to read. So I'm certainly not going to find it satisfying to write. And I don't write that stuff. So, I think it was a combination of that. I mean, when I really think about it, I was actually the first of the four of us to say, like, let's do it. But this was like a long time ago. Like, and everyone's like, it was like kind of blown, because we used to go to lunch every Tuesday or Wednesday or something, the four of us, and like talking. I'm like, let's just fucking do it, And this was long before we even launched the Patreon and stuff like that. Once the Patreon was launched, the cat was out of the bag. We couldn't ignore the reality of the fact that we needed to do this, and it was the best decision we had ever made. I knew that. I always enjoyed doing the content. Conversation with Colin's a silly thing. I tried to cancel the show like twice. Everyone doesn't want to cancel it. And I'm glad people like that, but I want to do bigger and better things, and I think we're going to do bigger and better things. And so I knew, late last year that we were good. Greg kind of, I trust Greg. I don't think Greg puts a strong facade and a strong face on. I don't often think in situations like that he believes everything he's saying, but he knows that he has to say it to get everyone to go along, and that the end goal will ultimately be fine. And so I trust him. He's never really steered me wrong. So it was that combined with the fact that I'm comfortable around these guys, especially around Greg, and I knew we were going to be fine. I didn't think we were going to be this fine.
Yeah.
But we were going to be fine.
Yeah, and I think that part of you being fine, more than fine, is your community, because this community is like nothing I've ever seen ever before. It's so positive, so nice. People like Sean Pitts, Amy, Zyger. These people are really, really just some of the most positive people ever. This community is really not great. Like, how much of a surprise was that to you, just coming into this? Because a lot of people are very negative on the internet. Like, this is very positive.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important thing. How surprising was it? It is surprising, because I was used to being in a place where the negativity was so overwhelming that you couldn't do anything about it. And trust me, like I made it a point of mine to try to fight it for years. I really did. Anyone that worked at IGN or works there that was there with me knows that was like something that infuriated me, and that like we could have done more, and we can do more as the internet. We can do more as outlets and as individuals to foster positivity. Now, it doesn't mean you always have to be positive. It just means that like I'm negative all the time about stuff. It just means that like there's a respectful way to talk to each other. There's a respectful way to go about your business. And we engendered that community from the very beginning. I believe that if you build something with a strong foundation, then the house that stands on it will be stronger for it. It doesn't mean the house is going to crumble or have some problems, or a hurricane's not going to come through every once in a while and screw things up. But it's to say that like you have a better likelihood than not of figuring it out and making it positive. And the one thing that I feel totally control of, and that the guys have totally kind of embraced, is our attitude of like, we don't want you in this community if you're if you're a troll, if you're mean to others. Like, I don't want your money, I don't want your clicks, I want you to get the hell out.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not ashamed of saying that. And that was something we really couldn't say when we didn't own the company. But I'm unabashedly saying that I'd rather be 20% smaller and 20% more positive and make 20% less money. You know, like if someone was like, I'll give you an extra 50% money, but your community will grow 50%, but it's going to be 50% more negative, I'd be like, keep your money and keep those people and put them somewhere else because I don't want them. And it's going to be harder to continue to fight that fight if and when and as we get bigger. But the thing is that I want, you're one of our core fans, right? And you understand it. I want our core fans to make those people uncomfortable. I want them to make them uncomfortable with kindness.
Yeah.
Like to say like, this is not the way we run the shop here. We saw that a lot with our Metal Gear videos when we brought in a lot of new people that don't listen to Kind of Funny, and they were just negative and mean. And I had a great time just going through YouTube and basically just banning them. They don't know they're banned because YouTube has that great thing where it's like just to hide all of their comments, so they just keep posting and farting in the wind and no one knows. Which is like the greatest troll of all.
It really is.
But we want our community to be focused on the solutions as we are. And I'm not afraid to tell an asshole that he's an asshole. And I'm not afraid to tell him, keep your money. If you're a Patreon supporter and you're rude to us and you're mean to us, keep your money and leave, because that's not what it's about. I'm not here for the money. If I was here for the money, I wouldn't have left college. I would have, been a professor or something like that. Not that they make a lot of money, but I would have been secure. It's more about the positivity and the positive message. Like, there's no excuses to treat people like that.
Yeah.
And to talk to people like that doesn't mean we can't have disagreements. It doesn't mean that we have to agree on everything. It doesn't mean that we have to even like each other. It just means that like you have to have a modicum of respect and a certain like decorum about you that treats others and doesn't make them feel uncomfortable. And so anyone like that, get out.
Yep. And I think that's very important, especially with PS I Love You XOXO, which was just, holy crap, the amount of positive stuff you guys gotten for this. Are you number one or around there of all, like right now?
Greg was saying it today that we have been number one in video games on iTunes since we released the theme song.
That's crazy.
And haven't been knocked out since. So we know what the people wanted, yeah. and we wanted to give it to them. Trust me, I've been paying attention, and I know that people want the show we used to do, and we gave it to them. So yeah. I'm happy that they liked it. I certainly, trust me, Roger, I didn't expect this level of positivity and this level of support.
Yeah, I think that's amazing, especially since like people like you guys are saying you probably are getting around beyond numbers. So like that's fantastic, and it shows that like if the community and if the market wants it, you guys are going to give it to it and it'll work out. And I think that's something that a lot of YouTubers think like, oh, it's not going to happen. The core, they don't exist. So you guys are giving to the core, and I really appreciate that. That's amazing. Oh,
we're glad that you like it, and we're glad that everyone else likes it. It was a show that was unintuitive originally for us to do because we were walking away from Podcast Beyond. And what I think that people don't realize is, and I don't think what Greg and I didn't realize either, was how much we were going to miss doing that show and how much people missed us doing that show. They didn't miss us because they can have us any day, but they missed us doing that show because that was such a part of people's lives for years. It's like how someone feels about a sitcom or something like that, where it's on for 8 years and it doesn't feel like it's been on for 8 years, but then it was, and then it's gone. And
yeah,
and so people are like so stoked about it. I just hope we can keep the momentum up. I mean, and obviously a lot of people are stoked about it. We got Shuhei Yoshida on the second episode, so yeah.
And I got to be honest here, when I first saw that first episode and I heard Roper's report, and I was in the middle of my lunch period and I was like getting real excited. It's so good, and it just brings up so much nostalgia. I have two more questions because I know we're going a little long. Sorry,
it's fine. Take your time. It's fine.
But Colin and Greg Live, that's like a show that I think is very interesting. Twitch. This is your first foray into like a Twitch show and everything. How has that been going into Twitch, going to something like you guys never really used before, streaming here and there, but then you guys, okay, let's do a Twitch show every day. How has that support been for Twitch specifically?
It's good. I think that the support's getting a little soft now, and we're not sure. Softer. It's fine still, but it was really strong for a while. We're not sure if it's because like school's back or like, I don't know.
I think it might be that.
Yeah, I think it's probably has something to do with it. But Twitch has been an interesting platform, and Colin and Greg Live has been an interesting show for us to do because no one was doing anything like it. And I know you're not a sports fan, but as I've said before, Pardon the Interruption was a major influence on that show. And it goes back to game journalism and the failing of games media and the failings of the way games are covered. No one, like, I can't believe no one did anything like this for years. And so I saw this opening. I was like, oh, we got to do this. Like, this is a great idea. If I do say so myself, I'm like, we can. Yeah, we only have 4,000 or 5,000 people a day watching it with us, but I'm like, that's positive and it's profitable. Yeah. It is the epitome of Colin and Greg Live is the epitome of opportunity cost in the sense that it kills our mornings. It's not always convenient to do because we have so much other stuff to do, but we like to do it, and I think it grounds us as well, and grounds us with like a really core community that really likes it. I know that everyone can't watch it live. I know some people are upset it's on a podcast. There's nothing I really can do about that, but being on Twitch has been fun. It's not. The live product is not the way I want to veer with everything. I think Colin and Greg Live should be what it is, and that's going to be the way it is. And moving forward, what I'm more concerned about is like the overall quality of our product. Are people happy with our product? Do they feel respected in our community? All those kinds of things. It all kind of combines together. But Colin and Greg Live is like that way we want to start everyone's mornings, or if they come home and watch it at night, or they watch it the next day, whatever, in a way that's kind of gregarious and stupid. And the garbage truck on fire. May it forever rain.
Yep, may it forever rain. But okay, so Colin and Greg Live, you guys are doing so many amazing things. I think Kind of Funny is just like, it's just like people think it's going big and it's growing, but like this is nothing. You guys are going to grow so huge, and I see it all the time. And my question to you is, what do you guys think is the future in your mind specifically? Because I know you guys probably have different ideas here and there. In your mind specifically, what do you think is the future of Kind of Funny? What do you want to do with it?
So the example I used was we were at TwitchCon and someone asked me a similar question. And the way I put it was, I want this company to exist for so long and in such a way that no one even knows who I am after a while. That like it can't, for this company to succeed ultimately, and I'm not saying in the next 5 or 10 years, but ultimately it cannot be about us. And that's a huge priority for me, is like, if we want to do this for 5 years and call it quits, that's fine. But that's not what I want Kind of Funny to be. I want Kind of Funny to be a brand, and I want to own a piece of it. I do own a piece of it. And I want to just be able to like say, like, you know what, maybe you're the next guy, Roger. Maybe we find you in 5 years and we're like, you know what, you're the guy. You're the guy. Greg's giving me thumbs up off camera.
We're hiring him.
Yeah, Greg's already said we're hiring him. We think you're smart, right? You're doing all the right things or whatever. So who's to say that you go off to college, you graduate, or maybe you don't go to college, maybe you want to do something else, and we find you and we say, Roger's the next guy, and we want and the community likes Roger, and it's going to be about Roger now, and it's going to be about Fred and Sally and Christine, like whatever random ass people we find out there, and suddenly we recede to the background because we trust you, right, to carry the banner, and that's the future in my mind. We'll always be around until maybe we sell the company in the future. I don't know. But like, we'll always be around, but I don't want it to be about us, or eventually we're going to be 45-year-old men in front of a camera talking about video games. And I just don't think that's really a viable thing for us to be doing. So the example I used at TwitchCon was The Tonight Show, right? Do you know who the original host of The Tonight Show was?
Was it Carson?
No. It was, and that's what I'm saying. It's Steve Allen. After that, it was Jack Parr for years.
Oh, wow.
Then it was Carson. You know what I mean? But by the time you get to Leno, and then you get to Conan, and then you get to Jimmy Fallon, the people who watch Jimmy Fallon don't even know who the hell Johnny Carson was. That's the point. The Tonight Show has lived since 1955, and you don't even know that Carson wasn't the first one. Isn't it right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's the point. Is that the brand lives, and it's still as good as it's ever been. It's just someone else relating to other people. And so that's the example I use. I think it's actually a really salient example. It's a surprisingly good example because I'm usually full of really bad analogies. But,
that's a perfect example.
So that Roger, is the future of the company, is the four of us doing our thing for now, and eventually identifying those tastemakers, identifying those people that our community relates to. That's the other thing that's really important to me, is that, come hell or high water, we will go to the community to hire. That's super important to me. Not only optically, because I want people to feel like they're a part of it and that they can be a real part of it, like a full-time part of it eventually. So that's why people always say to me, like, oh, I want to give you my resume or whatever. And I'm like, trust me, when we're ready to hire, if and when we're ready to hire, you will know, because we're going to you. So that's the future.
Yeah. And that's exciting. As always, this has been an amazing time talking to you, Colin. Thank you so much for taking the time.
You're very welcome.
Interesting. Great. I appreciate it a lot. for all of you guys who want to go check out Colin's work, Colin, just give them all the links. Just spread them out because there's so many. I mean,
there are. You can just go to kindoffunny.com
okay,
if you want to see all the stuff, our forums, Twitter. We'll lead out to everything. And then I'm at No Taxation if you want to follow me. And I don't often tweet about video games, so if that's what you want, I can't wait to see how many Twitter followers I lose this election cycle. Oh. The last, because I really don't care about that number. Like I have like 110,000 Twitter followers. I'm super honored and humbled by that. I'd have probably closer to 150,000 if I actually had like some sense of like what I'm supposed to say when I'm supposed to say it. Because when Romney ran, I lost thousands of followers. So I'm interested to see how low that number can get this time around.
and we will see.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you again. Thank you to everyone watching. Go follow Kinda Funny. Go watch all their stuff. No Taxation on Twitter. Appreciate you. Raj Former from me. Bye.